As a teenager, I underwent 2 unsuccessful spinal surgeries, and the prognosis was for increasing paralysis from the waist down, with a good chance of being in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. The man who was then Archbishop of Cape Town prayed with me for healing, and after those prayers were completed, he said to me, "Robert, you will never again be enclosed by your spine." Now, I have to tell you that at that point in my life, I'm not sure that I even believed in the possibility of healing. I certainly had no idea what he meant by never again being enclosed by my spine. But I was about to discover that healing was not just about my bones. A few months later, I readily accepted an invitation to speak about my experience of healing. And you know what happens to you in that moment when you say yes to something and then think, "Oh my gosh, what have I just done?" Well, it was one of those moments for me. Yikes, Robert, what have you done? Surely this is madness. After all, what did I have to say? I was only 16, and there was not much of a story to tell. I came later to realize that it is in telling our stories that we begin to connect to the sacred, to the holy, who is revealed in those shared stories of our journey with the breath of life. The invitation was from a black church, and in the highly segregated years of apartheid in the 1970s, I simply did not know anyone who was not white. Apartheid was effective in its goal of walling people off from one another. It was an enclosure determined to keep you from the beauty of the Holy One discovered in the life of other human beings. But I went. And on that day, as I walked from my pew and headed to the pulpit, my heart was racing. I was worried about what I would say. I wondered if the zit on my chin would be distracting to the congregation. My hands felt sweaty as I held on to the podium. And looking out at the congregation, I realized that I was the only white person in church. A white teenager in the pulpit, no less. It was a new experience to be a minority for the first time. And as I looked out at those faces before me, I wondered what they were thinking about this white boy. Everyone dressed as though they were attending an important function, making me grateful that I had worn the only tie I possessed. I was beginning to understand that for many, church was the grounding event of each week. And with their attire, they honored the presence of the Holy One in their lives. As I began to speak, an intuitive sense of welcome flowed toward me from an attentive, hospitable crowd. We shared a journey in common with God. I felt no judgment. And as I settled into the story of my healing, I heard in my mind the words offered by the Archbishop about never again being enclosed. Was this weekend, I wondered, the path to a deeper and more profound healing? As I finished my story, applause erupted. Embarrassed and surprised and grateful at the unanticipated graciousness of the crowd, I broke out into a beaming smile. The courage to face my anxieties and apprehension about a foreign and unknown world was opening my life to the unimagined. The generosity of those clapping hands welcomed me to a vibrant canvas of life. By accepting this invitation into the unknown, I began to experience the pathway of breaking through enclosures. In the resulting friendships that developed, my exposure to the indignities and to the violence of apartheid was matched by the compassion, the hope, the love, and the peaceful resistance of my new friends. They were teaching me a lesson that I would carry with me and do carry with me for my life. That no matter how others tried to consign them to a lifeless enclosure, they were filled with the breath of life that they had chosen to allow to flow through them. I wondered if I would make the same choices if I were them. Was this the real healing being revealed? Was this, in fact, part of what the Archbishop was alluding to? I believe that one of the core questions for our spiritual journey, and you may use some slightly different language for framing the question, is what grounds you and me in never accepting an enclosure. Now, at this point, some of you may be asking, what does he mean by an enclosure? I would invite you to think about that question and what it means in the context of your own life in the days or weeks ahead. But I want to suggest to you that for many of us, enclosures are self-fulfilling actions and beliefs that keep you from being who you are meant to be. When we allow ourselves to be confined by the unacceptable expectations and boundaries that are drawn by others, perhaps our family or culture or work or religion or politics, we accept an enclosure that confines us and in the process tries to define us. And when you and I make a choice to hide behind our enclosure, we choose invariably to live with a more cramped heart, with perhaps a squelched voice, and often a lack of compassion for ourselves, and therefore a lack of compassion for others. And while that choice to be enclosed usually happens subtly over time, it is no small thing, because your life or mine is at stake. Enclosures lock you away from the delight intended for you by the Holy One, and deprive the world of the gifts that only you can give, shielding you from the people around you, most of whom you probably will never know, who need your influence the most. My reconstructed spinal column became a metaphor for the breath of life discovered in the richness of relationships that I could never have known if I had not accepted the invitation to speak at that small church. There is probably a similar guiding metaphor in at least some or several experiences along your journey. And as you think about what those are and invite awareness of them and what they might be teaching and revealing to you, I offer you this image from the Dalai Lama, who recently held up in a large auditorium that he was speaking in one of those sizable Buddhist prayer bowls. And he held it up and asked the audience, "What is the significance of the bowl?" No one ventured to provide an answer. And after letting a significant pause just settle in the room, the Dalai Lama, still holding the bowl, said, "The significance of the bowl is to be filled. The significance of the bowl is to be filled." And so it is with your life and with mine. So how will you choose to allow the breath of life coursing through you with healing and, yes, filling you delight? What will you allow the bowl of your life to be filled with? Imagine stepping beyond an enclosure. And then imagine joining Simon's mother-in-law, and yes, God's own self, perhaps, as you too kick up your heels with delight. Amen.